Good evening and welcome, everyone. I'm Alec Doyle, Executive Director at the Colonial Theater, and I welcome you to our house. While I'm welcoming people, I'd also like to acknowledge and welcome, is the mayor here this evening? He's not here, okay. Keene Fire Chief, I believe, is here. I saw him earlier, yes. Mark Howard. Steve Russo, who's Keene Police Chief, I believe, is also here. And also, I want to acknowledge the Keene Interfaith Clergy as well. And we may have some other dignitaries here. I'm not sure if Jay Kahn got here or not, but anyway. And also, I want to, of course, thank you, the public, for being here. This is an event, it's a public event, and it doesn't happen without participation. So thank you for being here. I also want to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land we're meeting on here tonight, that being the indigenous First Americans as well. This is the 10th year that the Colonial Theater has been able to host this event and partner with the Cohen Center. We are, as always, deeply honored to again be home for this very important event. In an era where civil discourse seems to be often displaced by hostility and intolerance, it feels like now more than ever we could use a refresher on civic virtue. Therefore, I would remind everyone that it is important that we gather, it is important that we remember, and it is important that we renew the bonds of community tonight. Thank you all for taking time out of your individual lives to join us this evening for a collective experience of commemoration and reflection. Thank you.
Each year, we gather here to challenge ourselves with very difficult history. Why? Quite simply, it is because we want to live in a community that is welcoming, that's diverse, where justice thrives. History matters to us. It helps us to see our own prejudices, our human weaknesses, and more importantly, the need to respond, which is exactly what happened and continues to happen here. Last year, at this time, I talked about Islamophobia and isolated hate crimes taking place in our own community. Swastikas are still being discovered in regional schools. More importantly, however, I think, all of these are being reported and rejected. The overwhelming response is that these and other expressions or actions of hate are not welcome here. In December 2016, Evan Osnos wrote an article in The New Yorker, and he said the following: "What is the precise moment in the life of a country when tyranny takes hold? It rarely happens in an instant. It arrives like twilight, and at first, the eyes adjust. We know that mass atrocity is not an event, but is a very long process. Denial, accommodation, adaptation by the majority are the key elements that mark that progression. Some leaders can reinforce, embolden, and inflame hatred and fear. They do not brainwash society, as much as they actively articulate divisive ideas that are always present in any society. Leaders can choose, and do so, to target others and inflame fragmentation and reinforce marginalization. Or they can build trust, unity, and hope. What we permit will happen. We take this moment each year to reflect upon our own agency and to think about how to be proactive in interrupting a process that targets others. In August of this year, Professor Yehuda Bauer, honorary chair of the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance, issued the following statement, quote, "I recoil at the sights and symbols of Nazi hatred being used to drive apart communities and as tools to express the supremacy of one people over another. The violent, anti-Semitic, and racist statement and acts have no place in any society," end quote. We know that responding to hate groups and rejecting their version of morality is not someone else's problem. We also know that there is an appeal in authoritarian leadership that offers simple and quick solutions by tapping into fears and targeting, isolating, and humiliating others. We know that this is not what our community is about. We are here to ask ourselves, how do we continue to improve our lives, the lives of others, and especially the life of our republic? On Sunday, August 27th, 2017, the Monadnock region came together once again in response to the events of Charlottesville, Virginia. People lined each side of Keene's Main Street, holding candles of hope and witness in order to assert that hate is not welcome here. The event, organized by the Keene Interfaith Clergy Association, was framed as "Be the Light," and offered a different vision of society than the most recent expression of American hate groups. At that event, Mayor Lane, who would like to be with us tonight but had a last-minute appointment, said this: "Over the past few days and weeks, we have been witness to racial attacks, anti-Semitism, and terrorism. Your being here tonight is testament that you will not be intimidated by such events, and that here in this community, we are not afraid. We reject divisions that bigotry and expressions of hate create. If you are a member of any group targeted by hate, know that in Keene, we support you. We are not here tonight to engage in protest," he said. "We are here to support our fellow human beings in peace and love and compassion. We reject white supremacy and neo-Nazism that some have espoused. Here in Keene and throughout the Monadnock region, we remain steadfast to our commitment to be inclusive and resist fear. May our commitment be the light of Keene, and may it light the way forward for all of us." Senator Jay Kahn from Keene added, "We are the community that helped raise a civil rights leader like Jonathan Daniels, and that helped grow a nationally recognized Center for Holocaust and Genocide Studies, a community that stands up for fairness and justice, and a community that stands against acts of injustice. Kristallnacht reminds us of what happens when we fail to speak on behalf of victims of bigotry and against acts of hate and divisiveness that isolate members of our community. We stand in support of those harmed by such acts, committed to standing up for victims, even when they fear speaking up for themselves." Just before we began tonight, I received this from the City Council of Keene, and so with your permission, I would like to just add this. On September 21st, the City Council of Keene passed a resolution in response to the tragic events of Charlottesville, Virginia, on August 12th. The council noted how Keene was founded by immigrants, many fleeing persecution, and how our nation fought a global war against such hate and persecution. This resolution from the City Council of Keene reminds us that violence has been used in our country to also intimidate and repress. It asks that people of goodwill speak up and denounce these ideas. The City of Keene welcomes all into a safe community. And so, as just demonstrated by the City of Keene and our neighboring communities, we resist fear and hate. We support the targets and the victims. We work together, we speak up, we expose and we denounce prejudice and hatred. We also welcome dreamers. We educate ourselves with events like tonight's commemoration. We choose to stay engaged and hopeful by disrupting hate and bigotry. This is why tonight is important to us. As we welcome our visitors and contributors to this evening's program, I hope our closing, shaped by the witness of Hikmet Karcic, a visiting Bosnian Muslim scholar, and Caddy Preston, a Holocaust survivor, will give us hope as we move forward, grounded in the knowledge of the past.
Stephen Louis, longtime friend of the Cohen Center, and someone who is normally here to participate, is unable to be with us tonight. Stephen was a child survivor who escaped Nazi Germany through Vichy, France, and then managed to get to the United States as a young refugee. He eventually went into the Army and was part of a unit that is known as the Ritchie Boys, an intelligence unit that was named after Camp Ritchie in Maryland. Ritchie Boys numbered roughly 15,000, and 14% of that number were, in fact, German Jews. They produced over 60% of the intelligence that was needed to win the military campaigns in Germany as part of the European theater. Stephen wanted to share some thoughts tonight, and I'm honored that Tom White asked me to read what he has to say. So he's not with us in person, but his words are with us. Please accept my regrets for being unable to join you this evening. This is the 79th anniversary of both Kristallnacht and the Kindertransport, the means through which young children were sent to safety in foreign countries without their parents. Early in 1938, I celebrated my bar mitzvah. The service was attended by 2 Secret Service agents who sat in the back row to make sure that no remarks were made against the Nazi government. Later that day, my father, a German World War I veteran, was arrested and taken to the police station. The German government had decided to give medals to all World War I veterans. My best gift of the day was when he returned home unharmed. On November 9th, 1938, the Nazis raided the orphanage I was staying in and arrested our teachers. 100 children were locked in the synagogue. Because the orphanage adjoined apartment buildings, it was not torched. Instead, the gas line to the eternal flame was cut. The doors were locked, and we were trapped. As the odor of the gas permeated the room, one of the boys had the good sense to take a chair and break one of the beautiful stained glass windows. For all of us in that synagogue, it was the end of the beginning and the beginning of the end. Following Kristallnacht, some Western European countries took the children, generally under age of 14, in what were known as the Kindertransports. All children traveled without their parents and with the promise that if all went well, they would someday be reunited with those parents. On July the 4th, 1939, 2 months before the beginning of World War II, I escaped on a Kindertransport from Berlin to Quincy, a town near Paris, with 40 other children. 10 months later, in 1940, the Germans invaded France and we tried to escape. We did not get very far, and upon our return to Quincy, we were caught in a crossfire of the Germans retreating, the French retreating, the Germans advancing, and the British bombing. When we got back to Quincy, our home was occupied by the German army. Believe it or not, it worked out okay. They allowed us to stay unharmed if we cooked, cleaned, and maintained their weapons. In late 1940, the American Quakers saved us and we were transported to Chabannes in an occupied, that is, Vichy, France. During my time there, I miraculously discovered that my parents were living in Haverhill, Massachusetts. In 1942, I obtained my visa to come to the United States. During the war, I had to leave via Casablanca. It was 6 months before the Americans and the British invaded North Africa. I was finally reunited with my parents, which was the greatest gift of all. A year later, I enlisted in the U.S. Army and returned to Europe. I was a Ritchie boy and served under General Patton as a Nazi interrogator and translator. I consider myself an extremely lucky person. However, with all this luck, I am not satisfied. There is still too much hate and discrimination in the world. In the United States alone, there are over 1,500 hate groups. In 2016, there were 1,266 anti-Semitic incidents, an increase of 34% over 2015. In the first 3 months of 2017, anti-Semitic incidents increased 86% over the same period in 2016. I'd like to leave you with the important words of Justice Robert Jackson spoke at the outset of the Nuremberg trials in 1945. The privilege of opening the first trial in history for crimes against the peace of the world imposes a great responsibility. The wrongs which we seek to condemn and punish have been so calculated, so malignant, and so devastating that civilization cannot tolerate their being ignored, because it cannot survive their being repeated.
The word remember intrigues me. In my working life, I work essentially with 3 languages: English, French, and German. And I would like to have a look at the word remember in those 3 languages and see what they suggest simply as words. I begin with French. The word to remember is se souvenir. It's a reflexive verb, which means that it says more than the action, it says something about the person who's doing the action. Se souvenir, the word venir is in there, to come. And to remember is, in other words, in the French mind, an activity where you walk towards or you come towards that under which you want to stand and place yourself so that you can comprehend its reality. In my native language, German, to remember is sich erinnern. And what that word embodies is that you make something to become part of your internal being, of your inner existence. So that it is not something that is outside of you and therefore disposable, but it is something that is inside you, works within you, motivates you, keeps you going forward. And in English, to remember, the word member is part of that. And the way I interpret that, the word re, that is meaning again, to remember is to make something a member of yourself. So when we remember, there is something that we take into ourselves and regard this as part of us, as a member of a community, member of a family, member of a nation. I want to say something about my native language. And I'm touched by the pictures that we have seen earlier, particularly the children. For a German to remember Kristallnacht and many of the other instances automatically takes you into one of 2 positions. One is to deny and therefore not to remember, therefore not to make it part of yourself. Or the other option is that as you make it part of yourself, as it becomes part of your inward being, you break out in mourning, in shame. My godfather stood at the burning synagogue that we saw at the beginning of the brief film in Bielefeld. My godfather was a minister in the church, and he was a missionary, and he stood and watched. He would not have made what he saw part of his being. What he saw was something that he applauded. That's my godfather. When I see the picture of this, when I see the burning buildings, I have to face the nation of which I'm a member who did this. My people did this. My people, they use the word onlookers. That is true, they stood there and looked at it. But in retrospect, what they are looking at, they were actually looking away. What they did see hadn't become part of their own being. My parents were away lookers, not bystanders, away lookers. And they looked away when all the children that we saw on the pictures, their parents, their friends, with their toys, were to be destroyed. I'm glad to be in your company tonight. Because you're coming, you're gathering to look at an event instigated by my people. You're coming to remember that, to make it part of your own existence. Gives me hope, gives me strength, gives me conviction, and makes me grateful. The ancient Greeks used the word mimesis to talk about memory. And the way they interpreted it was, you just don't remember something of the past, but by remembering it, you give it reality. Now. And so in some sense, that November night in 1938 is a reality in our midst. And because it is a reality in our midst, it enables us to do things about it, a good many of which Tom White was talking about. And many of the things that Steve Louis talks about, and that I want to talk about. That together with you, I can be determined not to give in to fear. Together with you, I am enabled to face hate. And above all, for which I want to say thanks to you tonight, together with you, I am able to keep on keeping on, resisting and commemorating. Thank you, my friends. It's good to be in your midst.
Each year, representatives of the city of Keene choose this occasion to publicly rededicate ourselves to serve, protect, and minister to all members of our community. As we just witnessed in the video, most public officials in Nazi Germany looked away or followed orders not to intervene during the events of November 1938. So tonight, informed by the witness of these events, we seek to further the common good and strengthen the bonds of our community. We envision Keene as a strong, just, and resilient city where the health and well-being of Keene and the people who live, play, study, and work here are nourished and supported, where our residents work together and participate in meaningful civic life. Therefore, we choose to remember.
The mission of the Keene Fire Department is to provide levels of excellence in emergency prevention, education, and community services to minimize the loss of life and property, damage due to fire, hazardous materials, medical, and other emergencies in an efficient, professional, and fiscally responsible manner. We serve our community and are responsible as professionals and individuals of our actions. Therefore, we choose to remember.
The mission of the Keene Police Department is to protect life and property, while assuring the mission of the Keene Police Department is to protect life and property and maintain order within the city while assuring fair and respectful treatment of everyone. As members of the Keene Police Department, we commit ourselves to being capable, caring people doing important and challenging work for the benefit of all citizens within our community. Therefore, we choose to remember.
The Keene Interfaith Clergy Association brings together people of various faith communities for common purpose in social action and prayer. We unite in our resolve to remember, but not only to remember, but to address wrongs past, present, future, committed in the name of faith. Isaiah says, "None shall harm, none shall destroy throughout my holy mountain. The world will be filled with knowledge of God like waters of the ocean covering the earth." Therefore, we choose to remember.
The Cohen Center for Holocaust and Genocide Studies at Keene State College advances the public liberal arts mission of the college through Holocaust and genocide education, inspiring students and other citizens to take individual and community responsibility for promoting human dignity and civic responsibility while confronting the escalating violence that leads to atrocity and genocide. To this end, the Cohen Center joins the campus community and its many partners in promoting an active and informed citizenry committed to mutual respect and justice. As we choose to remember the night of broken glass, we remind ourselves to care for one another, to love one another, to hold one another, to join each other, to divide the sorrows that we're going to face, and to join each other to multiply the joys that we get to celebrate. To join together to renew our commitment to compassion, our commitment to hospitality, and our commitment to justice. Please join us now as we recite together We Remember. The text of We Remember is inside your program. Together we say, we remember that night as a moral obligation to the victims and the survivors, as well as for ourselves, for the sake of our children and for our community. We recognize responsibility to care for others in our midst who might be overlooked, targeted, or victimized in their circumstances. We remember so that individuals may refuse to become perpetrators, bystanders, or collaborators. We remember in the hope that present and future generations take responsibility for building a world free of anti-Semitism, bigotry, intolerance, and hate. Therefore, we remember Kristallnacht to remind ourselves to care for one another, to build peace, and be a community in which compassion, respect, and justice thrive.
We light this candle as we recall with bitter grief the 6 million Jews murdered in the Holocaust, and to remember the countless Roma, Sinti, handicapped, homosexuals, Jehovah's Witnesses, Poles, and others who were targeted and destroyed by the Nazis and their collaborators. May we never be numbed, indifferent, or complacent to the magnitude of this horror. In honor of their memory, strengthen our commitment to make a difference and to never forget.
We light this candle in memory of the 1.5 million Jewish children and all children whose lives were taken from them by the Nazis and their collaborators before they had the opportunity to live. In their memory, we commit ourselves to all children in the world they inherit.
For refugees, we light this candle to remember the plight of the refugee who has been forced to flee because of persecution for reasons of race, religion, nationality, membership of a particular social group, or political opinion. May this candle remind us to open our hearts and minds to those who, in their desperate need, seek safety and a place to call home.
We light this candle in honor of those compassionate men and women who, at the risk of their own life, saved Jews from the Holocaust. In the midst of the most frightening reality, they made room for their Jewish neighbors. May the memory of these righteous individuals guide us in helping others and creating peace and justice in our world. And I want to thank the person who saved my life. She was a very simple, non-Jewish, a Christian peasant girl who hid me in her attic and saved my life and my family's lives who came after me, 4 sons, 4 granddaughters, and who knows how many. We each have the power of one. Thank you.
We light this candle to remember the life and sacrifice of Keene's Jonathan Daniels and other people of conscience who answered the call to work for civil rights in our nation. May his courage help us to recognize our responsibility to protect human dignity by responding to racism and bigotry. May we be inspired by the knowledge that the actions of a few can change the direction of many.
We light this candle to inspire us to continue to build a resilient community in which respect and justice thrive. May we be welcoming and never forget our responsibility to others who are marginalized, not for what they have done, but because of who they are. We recognize that when any one of us is targeted, wounded, or humiliated, all of us share the burden of responsibility.
We read together the memorial prayer on the next to last page, toward the middle. The memorial prayer for the 6 million. Please join me. God, full of mercy, you who dwell in the heights, shelter them beneath the wings of your presence, high among the holy and the pure, who shine like the brilliant heavens. Shelter them, shelter the souls of our sisters and brothers of the house of Israel, who were slaughtered in the Shoah, small children, women, men, strangled, suffocated, burned to ash. They revered your name, their souls passed into your care. Let Eden be their resting place. Master of mercy, drape them and keep them forever in your protecting presence. Bind their souls to the living and to life. God, you are their inheritance. Where they rest, ease them with peace. And we say, El Malei Rachamim, Shochen B'Meromim, Emetzeh Menucha Nechona, Tachat Kanfei HaShekhinah, B'ma'alot Kedoshim U'Techurim, K'Zohar HaRakia Mazhirim, Et Nishmot Kol Achinu B'nei Yisrael, Anashim, Nashim, V'Taf, Shenitbechu, V'Shenechneku, V'Shenisrufu, V'Shenehergu, Began Eden Tehi Menuchatam, Ana Baal Harachamim Hastirehim Beseter Knafecha Leolamim, Utzeror Bitzror HaChaim Et Nishmotehem, Adonai Hu Nachalatam, V'yanuchu v'shalom Al mishkavotehem, V'nomar Amen.
Good evening. I am so honored to speak in this year's We Create section of the Kristallnacht commemoration. My grandmother lived through Kristallnacht in Bremen, Germany, when she was 14 years old. I wrote her story of honor, heroism, and hope in the book Roses in a Forbidden Garden as a way to come together, to create, and to move forward as a community, just as you all are here doing tonight. 4 years ago, my grandmother was 89 years old, and her unheard story was in danger of being lost to history. I knew someone needed to make this into a book or a movie or something, and then it struck me, why not me? Much to my grandmother's skepticism and trepidation, I did start the interview process the following week. I had grown up hearing her amazing love story and knew that that was what I wanted to write about. My favorite was the Marigold story. She was 19 in the concentration camp Theresienstadt and had fallen in love with a handsome fellow inmate. On her birthday, he whisked her to a secret room where he had his friend smuggle a marigold flower for her out of a Nazi garden and into their camp. Her boyfriend and his friend would have been punished with death if they had been caught. My grandmother, too, would have been executed for her keeping that gift for a full month. That sort of selfless romance, like something out of a movie, that was what I wanted to write about. But during the interview process, we took a very unexpected turn. In all the representations of Jews of that era, they had always been portrayed as sorry and pitiful creatures, and in many cases they were just that, but they were also so much more. Through our interviews, I realized that they were not merely victims. I discovered that they were heroic and noble and moral and resisted their oppression every day. But why had I never seen them depicted in this light before? I knew that someone needed to show the world this truth, and then once again it hit me. Why not me? So I then went to work on a play adaptation of my book so that I could let everyone else experience the true spirit of these people as rock stars. Yeah. It may sound strange, but my 93-year-old, ultra-conservative, devoutly religious, Mozart-loving grandmother loves some of the heavy metal numbers I composed. It's true, because that's what music does. It transcends. And when she first heard that metal guitar and primal scream of a man vowing revenge if he were ever to survive his torture, she said, "Yep, that sounds like Grandpa." You'll hear one of my songs from my rock musical after my speech. It is one of the softer selections, but it is perfectly suited for tonight's commemoration. It is about the time my grandmother says goodbye to her best friend and cousin at the train station as she is taken away to a concentration camp and ultimately to her death. You will hear my grandmother speak to the German citizens there that morning who went about their day pretending not to notice and pretending not to see. And I had to wonder what life would have been like for my grandmother if her hometown of Bremen, Germany would have been more like Keene, New Hampshire. What if her chief of police, fire chief, clergy, teachers, community members, theater and art community would have said, "No, not in our town"? What if they hadn't pretended not to notice, but instead stood up for what was right, like you fine people are doing here tonight? How different would her and all of our histories have been? On the principal dancer in blue, playing the part of my grandmother tonight, she'll be wearing a yellow star over her heart. This is the actual star my grandmother wore over her heart at that time. My grandmother wanted to personally thank everyone at Keene, specifically the Cohen Center, Hank Knight and Tom White, for all the good work they do by donating her star to their permanent collection. My grandmother and I believe that the arts, whether it be writing, acting, music, or dance, transcends age, ethnicity, race, and backgrounds, and connects us all on a human level. It allows us, in this case, to feel what my grandmother felt, experience pangs of heartache and joy, to mourn and rejoice as she and her people did. When we realize we are all far more alike than different, Only then can we hope to heal the world. My grandmother and I want to thank the Colonial Theater for believing in our mission to bring about this change. We hope this story inspires you. Thank you.
Just a little On August 27, following the incidents in Charlottesville, Virginia, St. James Church organized an extraordinary community fellowship vigil for Keene downtown. Mayor Lane read the following to the crowd gathered on Central Square. Tonight is an opportunity to embrace the connections among us as a caring city. Over the past few days and weeks, we have been witness to racial attacks and terrorism. These actions do not reflect the community we live in. Your being here tonight is testament that you will not be intimidated by such events, and that here in this community, we are not afraid. We reject the divisions that bigotry and expression of hate create. If you are a member of any targeted group by hatred, know that in Keene, you are supported. We're not here tonight to engage in protest. We're here to support our fellow human beings in peace with love and compassion. Let us remember that in this community, Jonathan Daniels spent his formative years and then went out and gave his life opposing racism. Tonight, we show a unity against hatred and bigotry we see all around the world, and to share our sadness at the death and injury that has resulted from such attacks. We are committed to the equality, dignity, and social justice for all people, and we reject white supremacy and neo-Nazism. In this region, we are committed to being inclusive. We welcome all people regardless of race, religion, sexual identity, or cultural heritage, and we strive to enable every person to reach their full potential. So go out from here and shine a light on the future, welcoming a diverse population to our region and looking forward with calmness and safety in this region, opposing bigotry and hatred in whatever form they may appear. Thank you for being here tonight. May our commitment to the light of Keene light the way forward for us all.
I have the honor to introduce our very first global scholar from Sarajevo. Can you come up? He's from Sarajevo, he's a Muslim, and it's a first, and I hope not the last of many. Can I give you a hug?
Sure.
Welcome. I'll let you speak for yourself.
Thank you so much. Good evening. My name is Hikmet Karcic. I'm from Sarajevo, Bosnia and Herzegovina. I'm going to tell you a short story about Sarajevo, my hometown, and about how we have a joint history of Muslim and Jewish suffering in Bosnia and in the Balkans. In 1492, Muslims and Jews from Moorish Spain were expelled by Queen Isabella. They were basically given two options, either to convert or to leave. Many of them left, and the first Sephardic Jews came actually to the Ottoman Empire, to Thessalonica in Greece, and to Sarajevo in Bosnia and Herzegovina. So the first Sephardic synagogue was opened up in Sarajevo at that time in the 15th century. We are very proud in Sarajevo that Sarajevo was one of the maybe only cities in Europe which never had a ghetto for Jews. The Jews of Bosnia have been and always will be a part of our society. Along with the Jews from Spain, they brought along a Haggadah, an illustrated Haggadah, one of the rare Haggadahs from Moorish Spain. And this Haggadah was kept and cherished in Bosnia, in Sarajevo, since then. So for the last 500, 600 years, the Haggadah is kept in Sarajevo. In 1941, after Bosnia was occupied and became part of the independent state of Croatia, a Nazi puppet government, a Nazi officer came to Sarajevo with the aim of stealing the Haggadah. He came to the National Museum and found a bookkeeper, a librarian, by the name of Dervish Korkut, a Muslim religious man, an expert in Arabic and Persian language, and he told him to bring him the Haggadah. Dervish Korkut, who is, by the way, comes from a very religious family. His brother, Besim Korkut, is the first person to translate the Quran into Bosnian language. Dervish took the Haggadah and jumped out of the window and ran away. So he saved the Haggadah. The Haggadah, for the next 4 or 5 years until the end of the Second World War, was hidden inside a mosque in central Bosnia, because everybody knew that the Nazis wouldn't dare to enter a mosque anywhere in Bosnia. So this was the first time the Haggadah was saved. The second time the Haggadah was saved was on the 24th of August 1992. At this time, Sarajevo was under siege by the Bosnian Serb forces. It was the longest siege in modern warfare. For 3.5 years, the city was under siege, cut off from water, electricity, heating, gas, no food supplies. And on the 24th of August, the National Library in Bosnia, in Sarajevo, was targeted. It was bombed by inflammable grenades, and 2 million very rare books were burned to the ground. The entire Bosnian history at one place was burned to the ground. This was an intentional crime. One of the books which was located inside the library was the Haggadah. But as the building was on fire, one Bosnian historian, knowing the importance of the Haggadah, entered the library and saved the book. He was a Bosnian Muslim historian. And these are rare cases where people risk their lives to save old books. And that is something which you can find in Sarajevo. The Haggadah was saved twice, and we are very jealous of it, so we keep it only to ourselves. We don't give it to anybody else. We Bosnians are actually very famous for being very stubborn, and I can tell you that this is quite true. A few years ago, the Metropolitan Museum of Arts in New York asked us to give them the Haggadah just to borrow it for a year. We said no. We don't trust anybody anymore. But the 9th of November is also a very sad anniversary for Bosnia. On the 9th of November 1983, the old bridge in Mostar was destroyed. Bosnian Croat forces, the Croatian Defense Forces, for almost 12 hours by precise tank grenades was destroying an old bridge. A small bridge which had no military use whatsoever. It was being bombarded for hours until it collapsed into the Neretva River. This bridge was a symbol of unity, a symbol of Muslim Jews and Christians living in the same town. It was deliberately destroyed as a sign of diversity, because fascists don't like diversity. Fascists like to divide people. Why is this a story of hope? Because firstly, Haggadah was saved. Secondly, we rebuilt the bridge. So the bridge is rebuilt, you can see it today, and it's a lovely country to come to. So thank you very much.
I will be very brief. That's what Tom told me. He says, don't speak too long. I would just like to thank all of you, because I know this is a very sad occasion, and it does break my heart. My whole family died, and it all happened in my lifetime. But I'm a very happy person, and I'm very full of hope. I'm totally optimistic about the future, because I've been speaking to hundreds of children, young people, university students, and so on, and the amount of love and decency among this generation. You people don't care if people are red, green, yellow, gay, straight. You don't judge people like that. And if we can keep this country together for the next few years for you, you are going to fix it. I am full of hope.
off script just for 1 second. Elise and Ruth, thank you for that incredible donation of the star for the Cohen Center. We are in your debt. We invite all of you to join the mission of the Cohen Center, to visit the star, to join in our mission. Support the arts as well, the beautiful arts that you saw tonight from the Moko dancers and from our wonderful, rich community. So thank you for all of that. Thank you all for being here this evening. We conclude our commemoration with a candlelight recessional that seeks to symbolically bring the light of memory into our community. We pass the candle of remembrance and hope from one hand to another, from one generation to the next. By standing as witnesses to the past, we become teachers. We choose not to despair, but to make a difference. Rooted by this memory, we bring the light of hope into the present and into the future. As the candles light our way, may we remember to teach and act with human dignity, respect for human dignity and diversity. After the candles have reached the lobby in the front of the theater, we ask that you depart in thoughtful silence. Thank you.